come to the top of the world. Sweden has a history as the ultimate man's world, a place of Viking legends and harsh conditions. Now it's regarded as one of the most progressive and gender-equal countries on earth. We've brought with us a very special guest from Australia, family violence activist Rosie Batty.
It's difficult to realise that in the beauty of these places, there is also the real ugliness of the worst of human behaviour.
Some campaigners in Australia say that if men and women were truly equal, domestic violence rates would go down. So we're here to put that theory to the test. If Australia were more like Sweden, would we be a less violent society?
Sweden is not a gender equality country. Not yet. We are working on it. But there is a lot to do.
I think the violence is very high here, but you don't speak about it in the streets and don't speak about it so much.
Swedish women may have more rights and opportunities than ever before, but they're living in a country with one of the highest rates of family violence in Europe. The statistics show just how widespread the problem is. 46% of Swedish women will experience physical or sexual violence by men. In the majority of cases, the perpetrator is a current or former partner. We want to know why. Is changing the law enough to change attitudes when it comes to gender equality?
I just love the weather vane. It's just beautiful. And the different archways into the church are just gorgeous.
We're taking Rosie Batty right out of her comfort zone. The temperature here in the village of Gammelstad is a brutal minus 29 degrees Celsius.
To keep warm in this temperature is just incredible. Because they wouldn't have had the polar fleeces that we're wearing.
No. We're making the most of the daylight. Up here in the winter of northern Sweden, the sun only shines for 4 hours a day. The rest is darkness.
Yeah, imagine like if people were living out in isolated huts and stuff, coming into here to have some social life too. You'd be so isolated.
This is the first time Rosie Batty has embarked on a big overseas trip since her son Luke was murdered by his father in February 2014. While Sweden proudly defends its reputation of gender equality, the causes of its domestic violence are harder to see. Some outsiders wonder if the long winters and alcohol abuse are to blame. But the reality is that the violence comes from within Swedish society.
I was somewhat shocked by that. I didn't expect it. I believed the myth that Sweden was a gender-equal society, but no.
Dale Bagshaw has researched equality and violence in Scandinavia over the past decade.
To talk about equality is one thing, but domestic violence doesn't fit neatly into that concept. It's something which happens in private, behind closed doors. It's the central to it is the issue of power and control. You can say men and women are equal in the public sphere. When it comes to the private sphere, it's a different story. I think it's been challenging to some men, of course, this whole emphasis on equality.
Masculinity has been through some big reforms in Sweden. It's become a source of comedy for those who believe Swedish men are too soft.
Merde, I fucked your mother!
Oh, really? Oh, that's so good for her. She hadn't had much of a sex life. First, I thought you were angry with me, and now you come with this wonderful message.
Someone forgot to put this coffee cup in the dishwasher. Oh, it says Fredrik on it. Maybe it's yours, Fredrik.
But the dishwasher was full.
So you empty it. Your mother doesn't work here, Mr. Prime Minister.
Okay, you.
Swedish men are still adjusting to changing times at work. Women hold more than 40% of seats in Parliament and an increasing share of power. Generous paternity leave has also reshaped the workplace.
Why are you calling me? I'm on paternity leave.
Ingrid, you want to attack? You want to attack?
I think we should have a group discussion about this.
That's a good idea. We should bring in Lasse. Yes.
The stereotype of gender equals Sweden hides the truth.
Well, I think that's a bit of a problem for the Swedes because it's a myth. In my experience, I think people so firmly believe it that they don't notice anymore when the inequality appears and the abuse and violence is written off as being something other than domestic violence. We're equal here. We don't have domestic violence as a problem. You often hear people say, in the Nordic countries generally. Myths do affect the way we think about things, the way we talk about things. You get a social construction of a national identity, which becomes very powerful. And the way we talk about things influences the way we think about things. And if you're constantly reading in the paper and hearing over newspapers that you are the leaders in the world in terms of gender equality, you come to believe it.
Back on the road with Rosie Batty, we're on our way to meet a young Swedish man who already has a long track record for domestic violence. This will be the first time Rosie has come face to face with a perpetrator who's prepared to talk openly.
Do you feel comfortable?
Yes, I do. I don't feel in the least intimidated. I think that after the journey I've had with Luke's father, I don't think I could ever be intimidated in the same way again.
The 26-year-old Emmanuel grew up in a family splintered by violence. He knows firsthand that it's not just men who are the perpetrators. It was his mother who unleashed the terror.
My mom, she was very violent to me and my siblings, even my father. She used to take my hair and throw me around and chase me and screaming at me. The worst time was maybe when I was 13 or something. She was very angry, throwing stuff. She threatened to kill my dad, and she took my siblings, my younger sisters, and shake them until they peed themselves. And I'm starting to get older, so one day I just threw my hand on the table and said, "If you touch my father or my siblings again, I will kill you." Then she stopped doing violence to me.
But there was no counselling or prevention program for Emmanuel. Instead, he was eventually arrested for assaulting and threatening his former partner.
The worst violence I have done to her is I've been chasing her, throwing her in the ground, dragged her and pulled her in the hair and took the hand around the throat and threatened her to kill. If she do something like this again, I will kill her.
What look do you see in her eye when this is happening?
Her eyes were very big, and pupils too were very, very big. And she had a lot of tears when she cried, and she tried all time when I was hurting her. She was trying to stop me, she was hugging me, she was trying to calm me down, but it didn't work. I had to have my own time to calm me down, because when I was in this anger, nothing could stop me.
Greg killed
my son as control and revenge to hurt me. If he didn't have intervention, he very potentially could kill somebody. And it makes me realise that, you know, certainly everyday looking men, what they may be hiding underneath, that you would really have no idea. So, yes, it made me realise that he is on a very dangerous path, and I'm really pleased that he is understanding of how much support he does need to make those changes.
I'm like that. When I don't have any words left, I just...
It's unclear whether Sweden is genuinely more violent than its European neighbours, or if it simply has higher rates of reporting. Once a case has been reported, victims are at the mercy of a system which is sometimes slow to act.
Despite the huge focus on gender equality here in Sweden, the system is far from perfect. Some victims say they've been let down by the police and the courts, which should be there to provide protection and justice.
On the 10th of February 2013, Sophia's husband threw her off a balcony. He then phoned for an ambulance, pretending it was an accident.
Det är ett mirakel att jag lever. Det var ett fall på nästan 14 meter. Och jag fick många skador. Och tanken var att han ville att jag skulle dö, men jag lever.
Sophia has lost most of her sight and part of her hearing. She's paralysed on one side of her body and has severe facial injuries.
Every bone in her body was more or less broken, and her head was completely damaged. So, I mean, the first time I met her, it was 3 or 4 months after the fall from the balcony, and she had a helmet on in order to keep her head stable because of the operations when they had actually opened up her head. It was awful.
Sophia's husband was sentenced to 9 years in prison for attempted murder. But he was acquitted after falsely claiming Sophia was suicidal and she'd jumped. Sophia's lawyer was infuriated. She took the case all the way to the Supreme Court and won. But Sophia's husband fled the country before he could be arrested. He's still on the run.
Hade man skött det ordentligt så hade han suttit och avtjänat sitt straff. Om man hade känt sig mer trygg och mer säker.
With this case, you can see all the mistakes that have been done during the whole trial, from the first day when he tried to kill her to today, actually. And now we can count all the mistakes, and there are a lot of them, I would say, done by everyone, by the prosecutor, by the police, by the social authorities, by everyone, I would say.
Why do you think that men carry out this kind of violence?
Jag vet inte riktigt varför. Jag tror det handlar mycket om personlighetsstörningar och att om makten.
While some activists are fighting in the courts, others believe that politics is the answer.
Vi kan inte ha mansroller som är laddade med våld och virilitet och som tar sig uttryck i våld i olika former, inklusive sexuellt våld.
Vad är det du konkret vill göra?
Gudrun Schumann was the leader of the Left Party, but decided to set up a party of her own.
Du är så okunnig så att det är ganska genant att prata med dig om de här frågorna. Om du vet vad genuskunskap är.
I saw that it wasn't possible to have these questions about women's human rights up on the top of the agenda. It was seen as something that was on the side. And when women starts to talk about our experiences and we raise from shame to readiness to act, you can't stop it. That is the future. It's feminism.
Gudrun is a seasoned and successful political campaigner. She's also a survivor of domestic violence at the hands of her former partner.
I think that is the most terrible thing that you can experience. Because there is a moment when you understand that now it happens and you are frozen. You can't do anything. That moment is death. And the meaning of the violence is control.
Gudrun Schumann's story is an example of how family violence exists in a country that proclaims itself to be gender equal. Fear and stigma still run deep.